Right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for all joining the Ask Me Anything with Tom Preston-Werner. Tom, just thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so just a quick bio about Tom. Tom Preston-Werner is a billionaire software developer and entrepreneur, best known as the founder and former CEO of GitHub, which he co-founded in 2008. He's also the co-founder of Chatterbug and has created the avatar service Gravatar, the TOML configuration file format, the static site generators software Jekyll, and the semantic versioning specification Semver. Currently, he's working on building Redwood.js, a full-stack web application framework that allows you to build and deploy Jamstack applications. We're so grateful that you're able to do this AMA with us. Just thank you again. We're going to start the AMA with just one question that was pre-submitted. And then after that, anyone else on the call, you can raise your hand on the Zoom call and we'll call on you. To do that, you just do Alt-Y, or you can click participants and then click the raise hand button. Yeah, so let's get started. So the first question that we have was what was the most challenging aspect of growing GitHub from a startup to a community of millions of software developers?
Okay, let's see. There were many challenges. I think the biggest challenge is just dealing with people. I mean, computers are easy, but people are hard. So we started pretty slowly. There were 4 co-founders, and then we grew the company very slowly after that. And for the first 4 years, we were bootstrapped, so we didn't have a lot of capital to go out and hire a bunch of people initially, which I think was good. That kind of slow growth allowed us to be more deliberate and make sure that we were focusing on our customers. But when things get bigger, when we were 100 people and 200 people, then you start having to worry a lot more about people, individuals, and how they communicate, how you communicate to them as a founder and CEO. A lot of my job became communication more than it did building directly. And this is just the journey of a software developer turning into a CEO of a larger company, is just learning how to set vision, how to set values, and guide the company in the direction that you think it needs to go based on what you know from the business perspective. And it just becomes very challenging and you also have to have enough confidence to really make decisions about where you want to go. Like any company has a lot of opportunities. You can go a lot of different directions, and the company's counting on you as a CEO founder to make the right decisions. And you often don't have complete information. You're in a new market, maybe the world's changing. And so you do the best that you can, but you still have a lot of unknowns in front of you. And so it becomes about asking the right questions and trying to figure out what that direction is and then communicating it. That to me, I think, was the hardest part. I think our product was really, we had good product market fit from the very beginning. And so that was actually less of a problem. It was more, how do we do this the best way possible? How do we create and continue creating great software when we have more and more people, and making sure that we all work together? And we work together in kind of a different way than normal. We didn't have a standard hierarchical management structure. It was a bit more, I like to call it highly networked. And so people could talk to other people. People were really responsible a lot for the things that they worked on and deciding what to work on. And so for us, it was even more about communicating what our priorities were as a company, so that the more self-organizing way that we were doing things would stay in the right direction. So I think that was the hardest part. That and enterprise, selling to enterprises. That's always a challenge.
Yeah, great. So we have a question from Vishal. I'm going to unmute you. You can turn on your video, and just before you start, just introduce yourself with your name and your country, please.
Hi, all. I study at UBC Canada, originally from Connecticut, and yeah, so I'm participating in this hackathon because I'm really interested in software development as well. So what my only question was like, what made you like start GitHub? Like, was it like a small hackathon idea, or like was it something which you discussed among friends and then grew up as a project later on in your career, or what, were you like, was it specifically a business plan?
Yeah, I'll answer that in one question. My first question to you is, am I sideways? Because on my phone, I think I'm sideways.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
do you see me?
yeah,
Okay.
uh,
We'll do this way and see if that helps. Is that helpful?
yeah.
Okay. You're just letting me be all sideways this whole time, not telling me? Come on. Okay. Yeah, so thank you. So GitHub really came out of a desire to be able to use Git in the job that I was working, which was at a company called PowerSet. We were building a search engine. And I was on a team of people that were building some technology using Erlang to create a more stable connection from the front end to the back end services. And my friend and I were working on it together, and we started using Git because it looked so promising, the way that it could do branching and merging. And it was awesome, but really pretty hard to use. And so we started thinking like, this is great, but how could we do this better? Like, there was just no way to share it online easily. Like, you had to have a Linux account, and you had to set up like a server and give people user accounts on that Linux server to be able to share a Git repository. And it was just too painful to do. And so I started hacking on it on the side while I was working at that company. I started writing a library written in Ruby to allow you to programmatically access the Git repositories on disk. And then I went to another friend of mine who was a Ruby on Rails expert. And I didn't want to be, I'd written a lot of Rails in the past, but I didn't really want to write the Rails part. I wanted to write this kind of the library code, the part that reads the repos off of disk. And so I started talking to my friend, and we decided to start working on it together. And so nights and weekends, we worked on it that way for a number of months. And then the company PowerSet got bought by Microsoft, and I decided to leave at that point. I have a blog post that you can read about this on my weblog. But so really it was just a side project because I thought that it could be easier to use Git repositories and share them. I mean, that was the whole point of Git, was that it was easy to share repositories and branch and merge. And yet it wasn't easy to do that for a normal software developer. You had to be like a Unix expert and have a Unix box set up somewhere that you could do this with. And so really the idea was, let's make this whole process easier. I know how to be a web developer. That's what I do. Yeah. And so I knew I could build a website to make that process easier. And so we just started working on it. And it turned out a lot of people wanted to do that once they realized how powerful Git could be. They wanted to do it, but again, it was really hard to get those things online and share them. So it was a side project for quite a while before it became a company.
That's great. Nice talking to you.
Yeah,
thank you for your time. Yeah, have a good one.
Yeah, that's great. So we have a question from Osama. Let me unmute you now.
All right, thank you. Thank you for being here. So my question to you is, as a developer, as someone who's building a lot of projects, eventually you hit a plateau, you become burnout, emotionally drained, you just don't want to do anything. So my question to you is, what do you do to overcome these challenges in a way that you are progressing, you're making progress with your work, but at the same time, you're not feeling depressed or burned out or, like mentally exhausted? What do you do in these situations?
Yeah, I think you got to take breaks. And for me, it's always going into nature. So I used to do a lot of mountain biking in the early days of GitHub, and that was a really nice way to just take a break from programming and not think about it. Like when you're doing some physical activity, it's often hard even to think about your normal work. You're focused on that activity, and mountain biking is this way, or skiing is this way, or running, I think, can be that way too. That can clear your mind. So that was one thing, just to go and do something that's just totally different, right? Like get your mind off of it for a while. And, your subconscious is meanwhile working on some of the problems that you're maybe working through and trying to solve problems that might become frustrating and lead to that burnout. But I think honestly, a large part of burnout comes from feeling like your work is not being appreciated or being leading to the impact that you want. And so for me, for the projects that I've worked on that have been successful, that people have really wanted to use, burnout hasn't been too much of a problem because I can see the impact. Like I want to work on it because I can see that it's providing value for people, that it's making a difference in the world. It's those projects that have not really succeeded where I find it much more difficult to get the motivation to work on them, and where it feels more like a drag than it does like this process of discovery, and it's super enjoyable. I think it also really depends a lot on the team that you're working with. So finding the right team where you can all urge each other on, where everyone's really excited to work on something because of what they'll be able to show the other people on the team, that has been really successful for me as well. And both of the companies that I've founded had 4 co-founders. With the Redwood project that I'm working on right now, there's also 4 of us that we consider the main core team. And so for whatever reason, this group of 4 people has worked really well for me as a founding or an initial team of people. And I think that's really important because, again, burnout can come from this feeling of being overwhelmed. So there's maybe two ways that you get burnout. One is you feel like you're doing a bunch of work for nothing. And the other one maybe is you're doing too much. There's too much work for you to do. So like maybe you start a popular open source project, but it's just you, and then people start to rely on it. And you're like, this is too much for me to work on. I can't, it's too much responsibility. Now people are yelling at me. So I'll give you an example. So the Gravatar project is one that I created a bunch of years ago, like 2003. And I created Gravatar, which is the globally recognized avatar service. I sold it to WordPress and they run it now, but it's like the avatars that follow you from blog to blog, if you've seen those. But Gravatar became pretty popular and it was just me working on it. And I created it because I wanted to create something cool in the world of blogs. And I did. I managed to pull that off. Like I did create something that people really liked, but then it became popular and then it started to perform badly because it was not written to scale very well. And then I had this big task of like trying to rewrite it and figure out how to make that work. And in the meantime, the performance was really bad and people started like yelling at me about it and sending in really nasty and mean emails and stuff. And like, it was really pretty demotivating how people were reacting to it. And so that was also a time of kind of burnout, but it was because it was popular, but I didn't have the resources to dedicate to it to really work on it because it wasn't making any money. And I had other things that I was trying to do that did make money. And so I think there's those two sides. And I think both of them can really be helped by having a team of people that you're working with. And 4 people has worked really well for me as an initial group. And this is so that you can rely on each other. Like I can go and I can take a vacation and things keep happening. Like I don't have to worry that just because I'm gone, the progress crawls to a halt and like a bunch of people get angry if something goes wrong. You have people that you can rely on to keep things moving. And this is, I think, especially important with a company or something that you're creating to make money, because you need to be able to know that you're not solely responsible. Like that's a huge burden. And if you can never take vacation, or you can never take a weekend off, or you can never go and do anything because maybe that support request comes in, or maybe the service goes down, and like, what do you do when that happens? Right? Like that level of burden, I think, can increase the likelihood of burnout as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. We have a question from Tane. Am I saying that right? Sorry.
Yeah. My name is Tane, and thank you so much for doing this AMA. So my question to you was, what is your process for coming up with new ideas for projects and then getting them off the ground?
Hi, Tane. Thanks for your question. My process is, I think it starts with just being really interested in something. So when it comes to something like, most of my projects are around software development. And I think it starts with being really interested and seeing where the edges of that area are. So like, what is possible? And then I think exploring the edge of that possible. So for instance, with GitHub, it was, hey, here's this version control system. It looks like it's I knew about it because I was interested in knowing about the bleeding edge of development and what was going on in the open source world, and just working in a company with a lot of other software developers who could kind of surface some of these things. But it's just being aware of those edges and then thinking about where you could improve them, and always looking out for where things are terrible, right? Like this is where opportunity comes from. Opportunity comes from when the current solutions are not good enough. So anytime you're frustrated with something, that's a good thing to note and say, like, this process is terrible, or this piece of software is terrible, or this product is terrible, whatever it is that's giving you that sort of feeling of like, why is this so bad, or why is this so hard? Then I'd say make note of those. And in the case of GitHub, it was, why is it so hard to put a Git repository online and then have other people share it with you and contribute back? Like, this is not a good process, and there was no good web interfaces to do it, and it just wasn't working. Or in the case of Chatterbug, which is my current startup for learning foreign languages, it's, why is it so hard to learn a foreign language? Like, why are all these products terrible? Even the ones that are well designed, like Duolingo, end up being really ineffective. And so the question is like, why is this so hard? Like, why has nobody used technology to solve this problem in a better way, right? And then it's okay, well, let's create a digital platform for learning languages that also connects you with real people so you can practice speaking the language. Or with Redwood, it's not so much that things were terrible, it's more that there was an opportunity that hadn't been explored yet. So this is really important with new technology. So when technologies first come out and start to mature, that's a really good place to look for opportunities for side projects or open source or building a company, to find these places where you've got a technology wave that you think is about to start, because you can ride that wave. So GitHub was that with Git adoption. That sort of drove GitHub adoption. I mean, I think with the two Git and GitHub were mutually beneficial to each other, obviously. But you get on that technology wave, like people want a better way to collaborate on software. Or now with Redwood is really saying the Jamstack is a thing. You can look up Jamstack if you're not familiar with it. The Jam in Jamstack stands for JavaScript API Markup. It's kind of a new architecture for building websites, but it's missing some pieces. It's mostly good for marketing sites where it's static content. Maybe you've got a CMS, content management system, where you've got a bunch of content that's being pulled into a site and then published statically and delivered over a CDN. And that's cool, but what I want to do is build a full stack web app, right? Like GitHub or Chatterbug or whatever. I want a database, I want the whole thing. And so Redwood is really trying to solve that question, but using this Jamstack architecture style. So that project came out of what I see as an opportunity in that space to make it a lot easier to build web applications than people have been doing before, and also to make them scalable in a much easier fashion than people have before. So really it's always about identifying things that are terrible that could be better, or where there are opportunities that have not yet been explored. And all of those things exist kind of on the edges of what is currently possible. So that's usually how I do it. And then, I mean, I have a million ideas for things that could be done, but most of them stay at this low level of like, yeah, but that would be super hard because of, these preconditions, or it would require a lot of capital investment. And like, am I ready to take that kind of a risk, or all these things? And then at some point though, I'll reach a point where I just feel like it has to be done. And then I'll take the first step, and then I'll see how that goes, and then keep taking more steps if that works. And it becomes this sort of ongoing commitment. So that's kind of my process right now.
Thank you.
So we have a question from Rishabh.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Tom. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
My name is Rishabh. I'm currently in my pre-final year of BTech in computer science. So, sir, my question to you is, there are a lot of young aspiring entrepreneurs in this call. So what would be your top 3 advice to them who are just starting? Like, I am also about to graduate next year, and I also want to start something of my own. I've been planning something. So what are the top 3 advices to them. Also, my second question to you is, what is your definition of success?
Okay. I'll start with the second one. Success. What is success? I think that's really different for every person. I think it's a very personal thing. Usually it is going to mean that you want to achieve something that you haven't yet. And so for different people, that can mean different things, right? For a lot of people, that means having a product that a bunch of people want to use and hopefully making money. I think that's one of them. One of them could be strictly making an impact on the world, which may or may not make a lot of money. Nonprofits are like this. And you can have a very successful nonprofit, I think, in being able to serve a lot of people. For some, it's achieving some level of financial stability, and that would be success. For some people, I think it's just being happy, and maybe that could be a very different type of success. I don't think there is one kind of success. Success can mean whatever you want it to mean. And I think it can change over time too, right? Like for me, when I think about success in any of the projects or things that I do in life, it's about achieving something that I haven't yet achieved. So at one point I really wanted to be my own boss and start a company. And so I've done that. And so I count that as a certain success. I created a product that a lot of people wanted to use. That's a level of success. You know, with Chatterbug, it's a very different company. It's much more consumer oriented. It's much more marketing driven. And so I think we're still along that journey. And for me, success there means I really want to be able to serve millions of people. And we're a very, very long way from that. So I can't claim success there yet. With things like open source projects, it's mostly about people using them, right? There's no financial upside directly for many of those. Like Jekyll, there was never, I mean, that was always just a side project that got rolled in to power GitHub pages. And so there's some element of that being part of that company. But when I first started Jekyll, it was just for myself to power my weblog. But now hundreds of thousands of people probably have created, or maybe not hundreds of thousands of people, but there's hundreds of thousands of websites out there probably that use Jekyll, maybe tens of thousands out there that use it. And so I count that as a success for an open source project. Redwood, I think, is the same way. It has, I would say that there's some success in that it was received well and we're building a community around it. And so it's like, there's all these different levels of, you know, it's like when we launched it, I wanted it to be on Hacker News and for a lot of people to see it so that they would be aware of it. And so that was a success, like that one specific thing. We were able to make that work. But I think there's an unlimited number of points in time where you can strive for success. It's really about setting a goal and then achieving it. So maybe that's what it is for me. Is success is achieving a goal that you've set for yourself or some specific thing. And I'll leave that one at that. As far as entrepreneurial advice, I think the key is to find the balance between, well, first you have to start something, right? So maybe that's tip number one is start something, anything. Because if you don't, then you'll never succeed by any, no matter, right? That's in order to have to succeed, you have to have the goal. And if you never start anything, then what would your goal be as far as starting a company, being an entrepreneur? So start something. And maybe you start a thing and it doesn't work out within a week or two. And so you're like, okay, well, that didn't work, but I tried. And then you try another thing. When I was younger, I tried all kinds of things and many of them didn't work when I was just working for myself doing consulting. And I tried all kinds of ideas and very few of them worked, right? And then I did Gravatar, and Gravatar kind of worked, but didn't make money. But that got me up to San Francisco to work for a company. And then that got me to starting GitHub. So, and none of those things would have worked if I hadn't started, right? And I wrote this library called Chronic. That's a date time parsing library for Ruby that became fairly popular. And I didn't write it because I needed it. I wrote it because I thought it would be an interesting exercise, and it didn't exist in Ruby. And it's all just starting. So I think so thing number one is start lots of things. There's a great quote by the chemist Linus Pauling, who said, the best way to have a good idea is to have a lot of ideas. And so that is that piece of advice, which is you have to try lots of things. You're not just going to pick an idea and have it work the first time. It's just not plausible. Like there's too much to learn. There's too many things that you need to experience before the idea that's going to take you where you want to get is going to come from, right? Like GitHub was like the 17,000th idea that I had, right? It's never just the first thing. So just keep trying, right? Like try. So iteration. And the second thing I would say is be very careful about the team that you build and the people that you have on it, because that's going to be a huge determiner of success or failure. Most companies fail not because the product is something that wouldn't work, it's because the teams fall apart. And so you have to find people that you're going to be able to work with together for the long term. Because if you start a company and it's successful, you could be doing it for 10, 20, 50 years, right? And those people can change, but in the early days, if you change too much of the people too quickly, then it's a huge amount of turmoil. And so finding those people that are willing to dedicate themselves to something that you get along with, and that's probably the hardest part. And again, this goes into trying things out. The more that you try things out and can start creating communities and meeting people, the more of those kinds of people that you will meet, that you know that you could start a company with if you wanted to. So networking is really important. Being out there, going to meetups. It's hard right now, but doing things online, just finding people who are like you and interested in the same things and getting to know them a little bit so that when the time comes to start putting a team together, you could find a few people that you would want to do that with. And I guess another tip would be when you do start a company, start it with other people so that it's not just you. I've known a number of people that have started companies by themselves and they're always miserable because they always feel like the entire future of the company is on their shoulders. There's no one to help them carry that load or who they feel like they can talk to that has an equal level, right? If you're the founder, CEO, and it's just you, and then you hire some people underneath you, those people will always be your employees. They'll never be equals. The only people in a company when you're a founder are other founders. And so if you can start a company with other founders, then you have those other people that you can talk to like a normal person and have a normal relationship and not a employer-employee relationship. And then you just automatically get more dedication from people that are founders because they created it too. They have a much larger equity stake if that's a thing that you're doing. And that can take you a long way. And then that's maybe 3, but I'll add another one. This is Paul Graham and Y Combinator say this all the time. And it's so obvious when you say it, but clearly true, is build something that people want, right? Like if you don't build something that people want, you're sort of screwed. No amount of marketing will ever get you to the point where you can trick so many people to buy the thing that you built, even though they don't want it. That's going to lead to a success, or at least a success that you want, right? Like you could be fraudulent about it and maybe reach some level of success, but don't think that I would count a fraudulent success as a real success.
Thank you so much.
Great. So it looks like we are about at 30 minutes. We still got more questions. Do you think you can continue going?
Yeah, I could do 1 or 2 more, and then I got to get back to my kids. My wife's with the kids right now, and that won't last forever.
Sure. Yeah, so thank you so much. Rosa, you can unmute.
Hi, I kind of can't believe I'm talking to the co-founder of GitHub now, but my name is Rosa. I'm a high school student in Canada. And my question to you is, how do you know who the right co-founder is?
Hi, Rosa. Good to meet you. Excellent question. It's often that you won't know for sure. This is where I think open source can be a really big help, in that if you can work with someone, then you can get to know what they're really like. And I think that's really the key. It's working with someone. It's not even necessarily being someone's friend. Like that can give you a lot of insight into them, but until you've really worked with someone on a real project, that's when you really know. Like think like in school, we all have these group projects where we have to work together with other people to build something, and then not everyone is as into it or as dedicated as you are. And it's in that working with someone that you really get to understand what their work ethic is, what their taste level is in what it means for something to be good or not, or what counts as being complete. And that you might even be friends with someone that you can be super good friends with someone, and you love hanging out, and it's awesome. But then you do a group project with them, and you're like, you're a great friend, but you're a really bad, coworker. So that's certainly possible. So I think that really the proof is in working together. And unfortunately, that's often hard to come by, especially early on in your career out of school, that you've really worked with a lot of people in that way. And so oftentimes it's a bit of a gamble. I'd say that the biggest thing you can do is try to work on a person with something. If you're like, hey, this person could be a good co-founder at some point, is there something that you could work on with them? And open source is a great way to do this. Like if you're going to start a company that's going to be based around coding, then you can meet a lot of people and actually work with them via open source, and then they can be working with you, right? So if it's some technology that you may use for a future company, or it almost doesn't matter. It's just like, that's a way that you can work with people without it costing you money, without there really being anything too much at stake that you're going to risk doing it. But so I'd say there is no sure way. Just like in hiring for a company, there's no way to know for sure whether people are going to be a good hire. It's at some point you make the call and you see if it works or not. And if it doesn't work, like you have to fire a person, and that's terrible. When you're founding a company, the stakes are even higher. And so with GitHub, I had not worked with any of the people that were my co-founders. And luckily that worked out for the most part. You certainly learn things in the long run that you didn't know before. But now with Chatterbug, my second kind of proper startup, I had worked with all of the people before. All three of my co-founders came from GitHub. So I had worked with them at GitHub. And that's been a much easier thing to navigate because we all knew each other. We'd all worked together before, and we knew what that meant. And so that's been, I think, smoother. And then with Redwood, that group of people, I've worked with two of them before. And then the third one I had not worked with before. And he's amazing, but it's a gamble because I hadn't worked with him before. I had been friends with him for many years, and we had a lot of really good conversations about technology. And my inclination was that he was going to be awesome, but I didn't know for sure. But now I do, now that I've worked with him, right? And now that I've worked with him, I could say absolutely, like, he would make an excellent co-founder. But I can only say that because I have spent some time working with him now. So hopefully that gives you some ideas.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so I think that this will be our last question from Adam. And then after that, we can let Tom go back to his family. Adam, can you unmute yourself?
Hello, my name is Adam Abramowitz. I'm from New York. What would you say was the largest technical challenge with starting GitHub?
Hello, Adam. Good to meet you. I would say there was a period where performance became a problem. Like this is constantly a thing, right? Like your software project gets popular if it's a service, and then you have to scale it. And you didn't build it originally to scale very well because you're just trying to get it done. And so early in the GitHub story, after about a year of us doing it, or a year and a half, performance was getting really bad. Page loads were taking forever. And it was just because of the architecture that we had was all designed to work on a single file system. And so we had these NFS disks set up so that every front-end server would contact the same a set of back-end servers, but they would mount them and pretend like they were local. And this was because Grit, which was the Ruby library that I wrote to talk for the Rails front end, to talk to the disk to get the Git repositories and then parse them and present the information to Ruby, that's how it worked. It just went direct to disk. And so the file systems had to be local. And it eventually turned out that this was not going to scale really well. And this is where the performance problems were coming from. And so over the course of about 3 months or 4 months, I sat down and I rewrote the entire back-end architecture of GitHub and created a bunch of new open source projects. it was just, I hadn't done anything like that before. And it was just super technically challenging and interesting to do. And you can look this up. There's a blog post out there called How We Made GitHub Fast, I think. And if you want to read that, that's a post that I wrote about all of the architectural changes that we were making in order to be able to scale GitHub out better. And we switched to a new vendor, and we started being able to have as many front ends as we wanted, as many back ends as we wanted. And then the front ends would figure out which backend, which file server the Git repositories were on, and then proxy the requests from Grit. And Grit was kind of like pulled into two parts, one part that lived on the front end, one part that lived on the back end, and then an RPC protocol that would communicate between the two. And this allowed us to then have as many front ends and as many back ends as we wanted. And it turned out, I think, really cool. And we used that architecture for like 6 or 7 years. And it's now different. It's now replaced with a different back end. But it got us through that scaling point. And it's one of the most technically challenging things that I've done in my life.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. So thank you so much for joining us. All of us on the live stream, and me personally, we're extremely grateful for you. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm very happy to be able to answer your questions and to meet a few of you. And I apologize for being late. I'm in the countryside and things are a little weird out here. But I'm very glad I had a chance to talk to you, and I hope that my answers were helpful. And good luck in your futures.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Thank you. Have a great day.
And to everyone else who's tuning in, we will be posting this AMA on our YouTube. It should be up in the next like 2 hours or so. And we've got another AMA at 5, I think, with Professor Go Wong. So yeah. Good luck, everyone. Good luck with your hacks, and I'll see you guys soon.